Coming up on UGTV. A special session of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. We had set upstairs 7:20, but all the commission has been able to make it down, and our technical services are up and running now at 7:15, so we're going to go ahead and start. The meeting was originally called for 7 o'clock. I'll now call the meeting to order. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Roll call. McKiernan.
Here.
Mugia. Here. Johnson.
Here.
Kane. Here. Markley. Here. Walters. Here. Philbrook.
Here.
Bynum. Walker.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
Holland.
Here. This evening, the invocation is being given by Reverend Ken Netling of Faith Lutheran Church. We invite you to stand for the invocation and to please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's pray. Thank you, Lord, for gathering us, your Spirit among us, and the time that we have to do the business of our city and the community. Lord, we always lift up our first responders, our police and fire and paramedics and sheriff. Still mindful, Lord, that we pray for our brothers and sisters across the line, for our fallen firefighters and their families and those who still grieve that loss. And Lord, we pray your Spirit especially on our community, those who call this great city and county home, and the Royals, all in the name of Jesus. Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Reverend. And no need to rush tonight. There's no Royals game. So they're on their way to, they should be in New York and ready for tomorrow and Saturday. All right. Well, the first thing, well, I need to ask if there are any changes to any revisions to tonight's agenda.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, a blue sheet has been distributed. Under Section 11, non-planning consent agenda, item number 2 is being removed at the request of the developer. Item number 2 is a plat for the Legends Auto Plaza second plat. We're also adding an item. Item number 7 is the appointment to boards and commissions. It's appointment of Deandra Tolan to the Alcohol and Drug Fund Advisory Committee, submitted by Commissioner Philbrook. Under Section 13, Standing Committee Agenda, we have added an item. It's item number 2, and it's the grant body-worn cameras.
All right. Thank you very much. The first item on the agenda is a proclamation for Juniper Gardens Children's Project Day. I'd ask that group to come forward to the podium, and as the clerk reads a portion of this proclamation, I will meet the group and present it.
The proclamation reads, Whereas American values are at their best when meeting challenges through service and others, and whereas leaders in the neighborhoods of Northeast Kansas City, Kansas, and the University of Kansas reached out to one another in troubled political times and formed a unique collaboration that opened a center located in the Juniper Gardens Housing Project Community Center that eventually expanded into local church basements, the Turner House Preschool, and the KCK schools, dedicated to the discovery of new approaches to teaching, parenting, and caregiving, and translating them to services for area children and families. And whereas research conducted in Kansas City, Kansas, and reported in scientific journals continues to impact state and national practices and policies, for example, statewide child seatbelt restraint policies, improving school performance with peer tutoring, curricula for preschool language and literacy, better approaches to teaching disabilities under the Individuals with Disabilities Act, and national inputs of President Obama's efforts to bridge the word gap, an original discovery reported by researchers at the Juniper Gardens Children's Project. Whereas the research conducted and lessons learned in this effort have been disseminated to others locally and around the world and has become central elements in the practice of education, special education, early intervention, and early childhood education. Now, therefore, I, Mark R. Holland, Mayor, CEO of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, do hereby proclaim Saturday, November 7th, 2015 as Juniper Gardens Children's Project Day.
I'm Charles Greenwood, the current director of the Juniper Gardens Children's Project. I just want to thank the mayor, and I'd like to thank all of you. And I'd also like to thank my former director, Dr. Vance Hall, who was one of the original founder of the Juniper Gardens Children's Project. Also here is Marilyn Hall, who worked in programs with the first generation of KU faculty, working with community leaders in the Northeast community. My associate director, Deborah Camps, and my administrative director, Jenny Bryant. And we're pleased to be here, and thank you. We'll keep working and continue this great legacy. Thank you so much.
Tonight, there are two distinct parts of our meeting. The planning and zoning portion will be handled next, following by the regular commission meeting. I'll now ask the clerk to read the planning and zoning statement, followed by the items on the planning and zoning consent agenda.
We would like to welcome all present to this meeting of the Unified Government Commission. Members of the commission are Mayor Mark Holland, Commissioner Melissa Bylum at Large District 1, Commissioner Hal Walker at Large District 2, Commissioner Gail Townsend, District 1, Commissioner Brian McKiernan, District 2, Commissioner Ann Mugia, District 3, Commissioner Harold Johnston Jr., District 4, Commissioner Mike Kane, District 5, Commissioner Angela Markley, District 6, Commissioner Jim Walters, District 7, and Commissioner Jane Philbrook, District 8. As each petition is called this evening, all persons for or against will be given the opportunity to express their views. If this is the first time that a particular petition has been before this commission, the commission has three options. Number one, it can approve the recommendation of the planning commissions with 6 votes. Number two, it can override the planning commission's recommendation, but it would take 8 votes to override. Number three, it can return the matter to the planning commission for further consideration, together with a statement specifying the reasons for the referral back to the planning commission. The consent agenda is the first part of the planning and zoning agenda. Items on the consent agenda have received a unanimous vote or recommendation by the planning commission. Unless there is a request to set aside an item from the consent agenda by the applicant, a member of the public, the Unified Government Commission, or staff, then the planning commission's recommendation will be on all items on the consent agenda will be adopted by the Unified Government Commission at one time. I will read the list of items on the consent agenda, and when I have completed the list, the mayor will ask if there are any requests to set aside items from the consent agenda. This is your time to stand up and request that an item be set aside if you do not agree with the Planning Commission's recommendation. If an item is set aside, the matter will be discussed and voted upon separately. All items not set aside will be approved with the Planning Commission's recommendation. We appreciate the attendance of those people here this evening, and we recognize the importance of each petition. We would remind you that there are a number of items on the agenda, and we'd appreciate your efforts to make your remarks as concise as possible. We ask that anyone with a cell phone to please turn them off or switch to non-audio so you will not disturb the meeting. Once the petitioners make their presentation, anyone for or against will be allowed the maximum 3 minutes to state your views. As you come to the microphone, please state your name and city for the record. The mayor and commission are required to disclose contacts with proponents or opponents on any items on the planning and zoning agenda. I will ask if any members of the commission wish to disclose any contact with proponents or opponents on any item on the agenda.
Let the record show I see no one recognizing a contact with anyone on the agenda.
I will now read the items on the consent agenda. Special use permit application item number 1, SP 2015-48, Anthony Novich. Special use permit for a horse at 8731 Swartz Road, recommended for denial. Item 2, SP 2015 Edmund F. Mummert. Renewal of a special use permit for 10 cats and 1 dog at 4001 Booth Street, recommended for approval for 5 years. Item 3, SP 2015-54, Maria Villegas with Soccer Nation. Renewal of a special use permit for a youth athletic facility, training facility at 520 South 55th Street, recommended for approval for 5 years. Item number 4, SP 2015-55, Alistair Tuxton with Vox Theater LLC. As a revised synopsis, the renewal of a special use permit for an event center at 1405 Southwest Boulevard, recommended for approval for 10 years. Item number 5, SP 2015-57, Casa Agave. Renewal of a special use permit for live entertainment in conjunction with existing restaurant at 1340 Village West Parkway, recommended for approval for 5 years. Item number 6, SP 2015-58, Cindy Burton. Special use permit for 10 chickens at 816 South 72nd Street, recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 7, SP 2015-59, Sarah Purdy with High Heel Suites, home occupational special use permit for a bakery at 12516 Farrell Avenue, recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 8, SP 2015-60, Curtis Peterson with Pozzanelli, renewal of a special use permit for an existing skilled nursing and skilled living facility at 8900 Parallel Parkway, recommended for approval. Item 9, SP 2015-61, Michael A. Rhodes, Commercial Landscapers, home occupational special use permit for a commercial landscaping business at 10702 Donahue Road, recommended for approval for 2 years. Miscellaneous ordinance, item number 1, vacate utility easement. Is an ordinance vacating utility easement at 1405 North 98th Street. Those are all items on the consent agenda.
All right, does anyone in attendance tonight or any commissioner wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Any item not removed will remain and voted for with a single vote, as recommended by the commission, Planning and Zoning Commission. Commissioner Walker.
A2, special use permit 2015-53. Special use permit item 6, special use permit 2015-58.
All right, number 2 and 6 will be removed. Are there others?
Move to approve all remaining items on the consent agenda.
Let the record show no one else is coming forward or lifting a hand to identify additional items. It is properly moved and seconded. Roll call.
Roll call. McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Markley. Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
The vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
All right, that brings us to item A2, Edmund Mummert, renewal of a special use permit for 10 cats. Is Mr. Mummert in the audience tonight? Yes, sir. If you would like to come forward, you're welcome to make a statement about why you are making this request, and then we'll open a public hearing.
Well, I'm just asking for renewal. My name is Edmund Mummert, 4001 Booth, and I'm just asking for this renewal.
All right.
I asked that this-
Let me ask for anyone else who wants to speak in advance. Anyone who in attendance who would like to speak in favor of this, please come forward at this time. Let the record show no one is coming forward. Anyone who'd like to speak in opposition, please come forward at this time. Let the record show no one is coming in opposition. We will close the public hearing. It's now open to the commission. Commissioner Walker.
Mr. Mummert, you've been before the board before. Are these the same 10 cats you had the last time?
Yes, sir.
And you understand that this is not a permit for you to perpetually have 10 cats?
Excuse me?
If one of your cats dies, runs away, disappears, whatever the circumstances might be, this is not an authorization for you to replace that.
I understand.
You understand that?
Yes, sir.
Rob, do you know what cats he has? Do you have photos, mugshots?
No, sir.
Okay.
I want to ask a question. Are all of these spayed and neutered?
Yes.
And you have the documentation for that?
Yes, I
And that's
have.
been submitted to planning and zoning? And do you have all the vaccinations, and are they all registered?
Yes, I do.
Do they have litter boxes inside, or are they just dispelled into the neighborhood to?
No, they're inside. They got litter boxes inside. They don't go outside.
All right. I will just voice my standing opposition to additional animals in homes. 10 is far and away above and beyond anything we allow. I think it damages our housing stock. I think it's hard to resell homes that have had this many animals in it. I think it diminishes the long-term value. Now, and a homeowner might want to do that for their time, but our housing stock outlasts all of our homeowners. And new homeowners, I think it just diminishes the value. I think having 10 cats is too many, and it's and it's in a dense neighborhood. I think it's very difficult to tell other people who come forward. We just worked on dogs and cats and had an extensive amount of time working on it. We increased the number of dogs you could have to 3. And how many cats do we allow? 3. And so we have a maximum of 6 animals of any kind, and we're doing 10 dogs and 1 cat. We're up to 11. And I also feel sorry for that dog. So I just want to say I'm fundamentally opposed to this, and if it comes to me, I'll vote against it. Commissioner
You know,
Walker.
I'm not oblivious to the plight of animals and the need for adoption and people taking on responsibility. I think I voted for this the last time. I'll probably vote for it this time. But I agree with the mayor in principle that we have got, as a commission, to get a handle on animals and what is going to be allowed. And he's right. If your next door neighbor came to us and said he wanted 10 cats, I would be in a terrible position to tell that individual that he couldn't do it. We've had this rule on the limitation of animals for many years. I know it goes back before I even started working here in 1979. And to come forward at this time basically is a statement, or not particularly this time, the last time, that you were already in violation of an existing ordinance and you wanted to be exempted from it. Well, you know, I'm not going to put 7 animals, have them euthanized or perhaps adopted out, or even worse, abandoned. But we've got to get a handle on animal control in general. And I have some other comments on the other item I put aside. So you got 5 years, and I will be very surprised if you have the same 10 cats 5 years from now. if I'm here.
Can I make a comment?
Certainly.
These animals were inherited to me by the neighbors behind me. I started out with one cat. My daughter come up with a cat on the motor of a car. So I took it. So I go to the vets, get another one for a playmate. In the meantime, these neighbors behind me was feeding feral cats. And when they moved out, these cats all come to my place, little cats. And I took about 4 or 5 more and sold them to the vets. They had to give $50 a piece to get them adopted out. And the rest of the cats wound up at my place. And I took them, got them neutered and everything. And I spent $5,000 to $6,000 last year on these animals, special food, and they get all their medication. There's nothing, they don't go outside, they don't harm nobody. And my house is clean. Anybody wants to come over to my house and look at it, you're welcome. These cats are not in cages. They roam the house and they don't hurt a soul. And previously to my life, I've never had cats. I've always had a dog. But I could not turn my back on them. I mean, the little things were starving to death. I got one that had 3 legs, 4 to begin with, a dog chewed him up. I got 2 or 3 that's got sores. They're gross. And everything that goes wrong with them cats, they get special care. I got a veterinarian down in Rainbow Vets that takes care of them. And like I said, they are not hurting. They don't hurt nobody. And these animals, they get special care. That's all I can say.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Murguia.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mummert, thank you very much for what you do for our community in the way of stray cats. I really appreciate that. And if everybody did that, we wouldn't have a stray
That's
cat
fact.
problem. That is a fact. And I greatly appreciate all you're doing. And it just goes again to a testimony that if you review the details, things are not always as they appear. And that sometimes things like this are being done may not look good on the surface, but are incredibly beneficial to our community. So I'd encourage all of us next time to review all the details and the amount of money and all the paperwork and documentation that Mr. Mummert has brought forward. I just want to tell you again, I greatly appreciate what you do. You make my district better, and I greatly appreciate that.
Commissioner Philbrook.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you took on the steps of actually doing what we recommend, and that is spay and neuter. You're following all the guidelines that we're asking you to do. You're being an excellent citizen. And yes, sometimes we prejudge folks because we don't have the experience, or we haven't had the experience of having a lot of animals in a home and knowing that it can be done and be done in a great fashion. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Walker.
I too, Mr. Mummert, appreciate the fact that you've taken on this responsibility. And my point is not that you have taken on a responsibility that most people wouldn't. But the issue remains that it is impossible in a neighborhood to believe that everyone should be able to have as many dogs and cats as they want and not have some regulation of them. I appreciate what you said. You understand that as the cats move on in whatever way, that you're not going to add more cats to it. The fact that none of your neighbors are here is a testament to that. For me, this was just an opportunity to say this and another issue tonight are indicative of a trend. And I think, you know, great. I'm glad to see people doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Move for approval?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Seeing no further comments, roll call.
Roll call McKiernan,
Aye.
Mugia,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kane, Markley,
Aye.
Walters, Philbrook,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
The vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
That brings us to item number 6. Thank you, sir. That's been approved.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Brings us to item number 6. Ms. Burton, a permit for 10 chickens. Ma'am, would you like to make presentation?
They're in a contained area that's completely covered. The neighbor, we have the whole corner block. The neighbor kids have come over and they're learning about the chickens and eggs. We have a garden. And I just found out I needed the permit for them.
Okay. All right, I will open up the public hearing. Is there anyone tonight in attendance who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Let the record show no one moving forward. Would anyone like to speak in opposition? Let the record show no one is coming forward. We'll close the public hearing and we'll turn it over to the commissioners. Commissioner Philbrook.
Well, this is in my district, and I happened to be present during the presentation before planning and zoning and heard everything that was said and saw what was going on. And I don't have any problem with her having the 10 chickens because I believe that she's a very dutiful person and she's doing it for that reason. If you want to explain to them why you have 10 chickens.
We started off at 12 because we figured several of them would die before they got big enough, and we didn't lose any of them, but we have had 2 that we have animals along the creek that come up, and we have lost 2 of them to that, is how we ended up with 10.
But they're all enclosed appropriately.
Yes.
And they're not outrunning the neighborhood.
No.
And I personally don't see any problem with this particular one. I'm not saying I want everybody to have 10 chickens in their backyard, because I know I'm not going to. But for her, the way her land's set up and the way her setup is, I don't see a problem.
Commissioner Walker.
I don't particularly have a problem either. I'm familiar with where this location is. My point in setting it aside is an opportunity to make a statement that I have, again, seems to be a trend of returning to the farm and livestock, and I'm just simply, chickens in the right location, there's plenty of places where people could raise an appropriate number of chickens and they're no problem to the neighborhood. There are neighborhoods just to the east of here, for example, on 25-foot lots where windows are 2 feet apart, and having 4 chickens in the backyard could be a problem. And I know that we are waiting some report from the committee regarding the committee being this ad hoc group that is studying this ordinance. But I would like to get ahead of the curve on requests for chickens and ducks and rabbits and perhaps bigger livestock if that's an issue before it becomes a problem with everybody wanting fresh eggs and wanting to raise them. I'm not saying there aren't a lot of locations. I'm not saying if you have the right kind of location. I just think there are locations where you don't have enough ground. I know chickens don't take up a lot of ground, but they make noise, they defecate, the good intentions of people don't always follow through. I just think, we're going to have a deluge of chicken applications if we don't have some criteria by which to judge these. Right now, we're just doing it ad hoc.
Commissioner
Philbrook.
Yeah, thank you. We just finished up a meeting last week, meeting with the some folks to help us out on creating differences in codes for chickens, and it looks like it's going to be a lot more restrictive than what some people want, but on the other hand, it's going to make things available for some people to have chickens but be responsible. So we don't have to worry about people getting ill from the chicken droppings and all that other stuff. But it'll give us a good foundation to work from.
Could I ask just a general question? Is this group going to solicit input from the commission before they drop a proposed ordinance on us?
What we're asking is that the legal department put it together, and then we can have it disseminated to you to take a look at.
Very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have no more questions about this particular item.
Thank you.
Commissioner Philbrook, we just don't want that committee to lay an egg. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second?
It is properly moved and seconded. Roll call.
Roll call, McKiernan,
Aye.
Mugia,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kane, Markley,
Aye.
Walters, Philbrook,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
The vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
All right, your chickens have been approved. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
We now have the Planning and Zoning non-consent agenda. We have one item on that. It's a special use application for Claudine Barnett to keep 3 horses. Is Ms. Barnett here?
Mr. Mayor, the clerk is passing around a letter that we received yesterday afternoon concerning this case from another neighbor.
Okay. Thank you. Ma'am, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Claudine Barnett, and I live at 3814 Leavenworth Road, Kansas City, Kansas. And I am here to try to get another permit to keep my horses on my property. I own 3 horses. They have been with me since, the youngest is now about 12 or 13, and I've had him since he was 2 years old. The oldest is probably about 19 or 20. I keep them in like a dry lot area, and I provide hay and sweet feed for them and pretty much anything else they need. I come from a farm environment. I went to K-State for agriculture and pre-veterinary medicine. And I work for the state of Kansas also as a vet tech for the Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission at the Woodlands, working with the greyhounds and the racehorses.
All right. Thank you. I'll open up the public hearing. Is there anyone in attendance tonight who would like to speak in favor of this application? Let the record show no one is moving forward to speak in favor. Would anyone like to speak in opposition to this petition? Let the record show no one speaking in opposition. We will close the public hearing and open it up to the commission. Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Ms. Barnett. I have a few questions about what has not happened from the conservation notes that I'm reading that were suggested 2 years ago when this was approved. There was some concern raised then about the grass and site needs protection of the stream, and the conservation district at that time, and I guess this time, is not recommending approval until something is done for the ground cover. Now, I understand from the comments here that you contacted the conservation committee, but what's going on with that? I'm concerned that this is for 5 years instead of 2. I'm not sure why the recommendation was for 5 years instead of 2 as well.
Okay, conservation came out and they're giving me like literature and pointers of what I need to do. And I'm in the process of making a little containment pen where I can reseed the ground so that hopefully over the winter the seeds will set and then I can have grass.
Okay.
As
How long will that take? Did conservation say in terms of establishing adequate ground cover?
That's probably what they told me is that, you know, over the winter, you know, because I'm gonna have to throw like not mulch but like straw or something to keep the seeds in place. So when spring comes, I should see a new growth of grass.
The other question I had was dealt with their recommendation, there being the conservation district again, about the amount of acreage needed for your animals.
Yes. Ordinarily, if you have grazing animals and you're letting them eat off the existing ground, you would need 1 acre per animal. But I'm providing hay, and I put a large round bale in the pen with the horses, and they're allowed to free-range feed off of it. So I'm providing what they need. They're not ever hungry because they have something in front of them.
As I said, my only concern was that this was recommended for 5 years instead of 2. What I would really like to see is another 2-year and come back and we see how the ground cover situation is going. That would be my reservation about the way this is currently proposed. But
Is this 2 years or 5? I believe it's 2.
is it 2 or is it 5? I was thinking it was 5.
I believe it's recommended by the Planning Commission for 5 years.
I have 2 in my booklet.
Now, see, I thought in the past it had been 2, but I think this recommendation is for 5. I would recommend 2 and not 5.
Do I, my packet says 2, but I might, unless there's a misprint in my packet.
In the minutes of the Planning Commission on page 12 of your staff report, the Planning Commission approved for 5 years.
Okay, so the summary is wrong. It is 5 years then.
Correct.
Okay, Commissioner Walters.
I think this is a question for you, Rob. I'm reading the same comments that Commissioner Townsend is, and it says they're concerned about runoff. This site needs to be protected. The site needs protection of the stream before it is approved. It should not be approved until such time as changes are made. The same problems were noted in 2011 and 2013, and there has been no change in the situation. Was there conversation with the Planning Commission about that particular item?
Yes, and about the general maintenance of the property, and that we indicated we would not recommend any future approvals if the situation didn't. We've recommended approval this time, and she understands that they won't have staff support if they come before us again and the situation hasn't changed.
But they did approve it for 5 years.
Yes.
So that seems inconsistent. If there was a problem in 2011, there's a problem in 2013, there's still a problem. And it sounds like we're not really taking the recommendations of the Conservation District very seriously if we just ignore their comments. So just from my standpoint, I think we should not approve this until these recommendations and these changes are made consistent with the recommendations of the Conservation District.
Commissioner Kane.
Can I second that? And the reason I'm saying, you know, they've given you a chance in the past. We're already talking about how things have gotten on the ground and run away. And I don't think that we should approve it if she hasn't got it fixed from the last time until she shows improvement or fixes what the recommendations are, because that's just blowing us off.
So,
and we're here to set the tone, and it's a quiet rebuttal, so to speak. And that in my mind, I'm like Commissioner Walters. I don't want to recommend something if she hadn't lived up to what she's supposed to in the first place.
Can I make a comment?
Just a moment. We have more comments from the commission. I'll let you make a summative comment at the end. Commissioner Philbrook.
Yes, I myself have a real conflict with this. Yeah, I don't believe that she should be approved to have horses in that location, period. That's just, and I'm a horse lover, but I don't believe that location is right, and she hasn't followed our recommendations so far and our requests. So, again,
Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. I read and I understand where Commissioner Walker and Commissioner Kane are coming from. Ms. Barnett, do you want to explain to us?
Yes, about the creek.
Well, and the recommendations, why they weren't followed with regard to ground cover from 2 years ago up to now.
Well, I have too much, I guess there's a lot of small trees on the property. And I didn't realize that the trees were taking away from the grass that's there. And that's what conservation explained to me. I didn't know that. I thought that the trees were helping with keeping the ground cover and the erosion, but that's not true. Secondly, the creek that's there, it's a creek only by name, and what it does is there's no water in it except for when it rains. And then it's a box culvert that's directed toward the creek and pushes the water through it. I wouldn't even allow my horses to drink it from it. And the fence line to the creek is about 30 foot. They have like a stock tank to drink from because that creek is not, it has runoff from the street with the oil and everything on it.
Commissioner, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Continue.
If the trees are a problem and preventing this ground cover from flourishing, what are your plans with regard to the trees or?
I'm thinning them out. If, somebody comes by the property, they'll see that it's been really cut back. And I'm just working on thinning them out so that I could throw some grass seeds down so that I could potentially have grass.
If we were to deny this permit, what would happen to the horses?
I guess I'd have to find somewhere else to put them. I mean, because they wouldn't be able to stay there. I've got friends that got a barn that I could probably try to rent from them. They have horses there themselves, but, they're not going to be abandoned or nothing. They've been with me so long, those are my babies. I'll find somewhere to take them.
It is concerning that there were recommendations made the last time that haven't been addressed this time. I would hate to see these horses leave your possession. So maybe if there's some way that the commission could see giving you a year and you'd have to come back and if things were not in accordance. But I certainly didn't see 5 years. But, based on what the other commissioners have made mention of, and I agree, it doesn't look good that the last time the special permit was granted, certain things haven't been acted on.
Commissioner McKiernan.
I just want to make a general comment and follow up Commissioners Walters and Kane. It's very concerning to me that stipulations that were attached to previous approvals of special use permits are not followed. And I've brought this up before, a concern about to what extent we actually follow through to see that stipulations we put on these approvals are adhered to. And I think it really sets a very bad precedent if we are aware of the fact that stipulations have not been adhered to and we just blindly approve or reapprove a permit, because it tells other applicants, just put them on there. Just agree to them. You don't really need to abide by them. And that is a bad message that we're sending if, in fact, we go through with that. So I just want to say that it is of great concern to me as well. Stipulations were outlined and not followed through.
All right, ma'am, I'll let you make a summative comment, and then I'll ask Mr. Walters if he wants to make his statement into a motion.
Okay. Well, and just to sum it up, I have not been a very good conservationist, obviously, and I did need help. I didn't know how to do it or where to go, but now I have direction, so hopefully I can fix what's been done and make everything look better for everything concerned, for the horses, for me, for the land, and I'll just do my best. That's all I can do.
All right. Mr. Walters, do you want to make a motion?
I've heard all this discussion. I think a lot of us are on the same page, but I also am concerned about, the welfare of the horses and the intent of the applicant to try to increase her ability to comply with the regulations. So my motion is to grant a special use permit for 1 year.
Second.
All right, it has been moved and seconded for a 1-year application. And I think there has been clarity on expectation in terms of what's to happen next. Commissioner McKiernan.
So is this motion with the stipulation that consultation with the Conservation District to ensure adequate ground cover, and that stipulation actually say that the Conservation District concurs that adequate steps have been taken.
That sounds great.
All right. Does the second accept that?
Absolutely.
All right. All right, it has been properly moved and seconded for 1 year with some clarity about what the expectations are, and I hope you take those very seriously. Commissioner Murguia.
I just have a quick process question. You know, we do this, sorry to use your case as the example, but we do this a lot. Is there a way that staff, if she doesn't meet compliance next time around, is there a way staff can prohibit it from coming on the agenda altogether?
I would agree, Commissioner McGee. If you don't have this approval, don't even apply again. 'Cause
But it's not, my point is, it's not just with her application.
no, but everybody.
It's just a consistent, or does that have to be a policy discussion at a later date?
Rob? Mr. Richardson, excuse me.
I believe by the law, we have to let people apply.
But the planning commission is the
Yes.
first step.
And I think we need to also say, we all have a representative on the Planning Commission who by and large do a terrific job, but clearly they need to be the ones enforcing the expectations and need to be making sure that that's happening, because I think just passing them down the pike, they need to do that hard work for us and screen these before they get to us. So I think if we can pass that word down to the Planning and Zoning Commission, that they really need to, if we approve a special use permit, they need to make sure all those stipulations are met before it comes forward again.
I think in this
Joint meeting
case,
with the planning commission at some time and us in special session, so we could all make clear to all of them at one time what all our expectations are.
No, that's a good possibility. I don't think we've ever done that. That's a good possibility.
and
Yes.
and in this case, we have a gentleman on the planning commission that's very versed in animal husbandry, and they really look to that gentleman for advice on how the animals are being kept and working. And I think he felt like the animals were in good condition here and that it was maybe not as bad as the conservation district had made it out to be, given that the buffer between the fence and the creek. And so they did take these into consideration. They just, sometimes folks have a different perspective of it. It's not that they didn't analyze it or look at it or question it, but that's where they came from. But they were more lenient than you all are, and I'll take that direction back and to the staff as well.
Thank you. All right, it has been properly moved and seconded for 1 year. I believe that requires 8 votes because it's changing the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Committee. Roll call.
Roll call, McKiernan,
No.
Mugia,
No. No.
Johnson,
No.
Kane,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Walters,
Aye.
Philbrook,
No.
Bynum,
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Is that an aye, sir?
Yes, it was.
Townsend?
Aye.
4 to 6. Yeah, 4 to 6. The vote is 4 to 6. That motion fails.
All right, it is still before us without a motion. Now, is it just, Rob?
Motion to send
Rob?
it back to the planning commission.
Rob?
Second.
And Mr. Walker, would it be appropriate to say to hold that hearing in January to give her some time so the planning commission could analyze what's been happening on the site since that point in time?
Would be fine.
All right. Motion and second to send it back to Planning and Zoning. That requires 6 votes. Roll call.
Roll call, McKiernan,
Aye.
Mugia,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kane, Markley,
Aye.
Walters,
Aye.
Philbrook,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
The vote is 10 to 0. That motion carries.
All right, it has been sent back to the Planning and Zoning Committee and will be taken up in January. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to our non-planning and zoning consent agenda. I don't believe there's anything All right. Non-planning and zoning consent agenda. Does anyone in the audience tonight or any commissioner wish to remove any item? Any item remaining will be voted on with a single vote. Let the record show no one is moving to remove an item.
Move to approve all items.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Roll call.
Roll call, McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
The vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
That brings us to the Standing Committee agenda, the CDBG reallocation and grant application process that has been requested by the committee to be fast-tracked to tonight. I'll turn it over to Wilba Miller for presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. As you know, during the budget process, I was directed to create a new process for the application of CDBG funding. We've met with the Admin and Human Services Committee twice now and have given a version of a 2016 grant application for CDBG funding. We've attached to that a timeline to implement the grant application process for a total of $608,000 to begin advertising and marketing next week, the week of November 2nd, to have a deadline of December the 11th for submission, and to bring back to the Standing Committee in January.
All right. Commissioner Bynum, you chaired this item. Is there any statement you'd like to make about it?
I chaired it this past Monday when Commissioner Markley was out of town. There was very little discussion. It was very late, and we voted to move it forward to full commission.
All right. It is before you. Commissioner Kane.
You did a great job, and we put a lot of pressure on you, and as we always do. But I think the changes are going to make a big difference for all of us as we go forward. So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the change.
All right. It has been moved and seconded. Is there any other comment?
The only comment that I want to make is on some of these where there's boxes, is there somewhere I've missed where it says if you need to attach additional pages? Like, for example, history of the organization, not a lot of space to put it there.
Yes, sir. That agenda item went out 2 weeks ago. We've made some changes. We've now made it a fillable PDF, and it'll be online, and they will be able to submit either by mail or online or hand-delivered, and they can add as much as they need to.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. It has been moved and seconded. Seeing no further discussion, roll call.
Roll call, McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
The vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
All right, that brings us to our final item tonight. It's a blue sheet item. There was a grant that we agreed as a commission to vote to move forward for application back in May, but we've had some time to look into this further, and I'm going to ask Mr. Bach to make comment and prepare us for this presentation.
Thank you, Mayor, Commission. The concept of the body-worn cameras, as the mayor has pointed out, was one opportunity for a grant came forward to us earlier in the year. At that time, the commission gave us direction to go ahead and submit application for the grant. However, with the caveat that we were concerned about, one, policy that would be in place in relation to body-worn cameras, and two, investigation of other ancillary costs and issues related to these. As we've progressed through the year, we've now reached the point where we were fortunate enough to receive the grant. However, we were still continuing our research as to some of the different aspects, many different issues on policy, but some that the chief had put together with his staff was related to the cost of not just buying the cameras, but also the ongoing operation of those. And that is what he brought forth to the committee on Monday night. The committee did offer up direction in this regard. However, we didn't have it set up for a formal vote. It really, I think, does need to be in that place, and I can speak to that in a bit, but I'd like to turn it over to Chief Ziegler for him to offer his presentation that he set out before committee on Monday.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners, Mr. Bach. I wish I could come here and tell you that, you know, this has already been done. A body-worn camera project is out there. We could just copy that model and roll it out, but it's not. Law enforcement is struggling with body-worn cameras, and there's a lot of issues surrounding them that law enforcement agencies, one being cost, is learning as they go along. So we came up with the initial plan when we submitted the grant, and since then we've continued to do more research. And these are the current figures based on what we think would be a good camera project and one that we would want to sustain. So we applied for the grant. We had asked for 235 cameras. That puts a camera on every officer that is involved in some type of contact with the public or enforcement action. So as we start trying to figure out costs based on how many videos we're gonna store, how long and all that, we start going down and we look at number of cameras in 24-hour use, number of cameras in 8-hour use, and that becomes important when you go down and we plug these numbers into a formula that L3 gave us to determine cost. One of the big factors is when you look at the average minutes recorded per shift per officer, we came up with 360. There's a lot of schools of thoughts out there on how long a camera should run. Some people believe that from the moment the officer shows up in roll call, he hits record, it stays on, he comes off duty, he hits the camera again and he turns it off. That takes 8 hours of recording, which drives the cost of storage. So we're looking at it, the best information we have, we come up that our officers on average will record about 6 hours of video per shift, per officer. Then we go down and we look at short-term storage. So these are the videos that an officer is going on a call, turns on the recording, it's an alarm call, he gets out, he walks around the building, nothing there to capture, he turns the camera off. The video is of no value to us. We would hold those videos for 4 months or 120 days, short-term storage. So then we said the next number we had to come up with was long-term storage. There are no guidelines out there on what percentage of videos captured by law enforcement should or have to be maintained for long-term storage, meaning 2 years, 5 years, or 20 years. We determined from our best estimates that probably 20% of our videos would have to be saved long-term. So we plugged all these numbers in, and the next thing that I just want to point out to you that's important is the cameras have to be replaced every 4 years. So initially we would replace half the 4th year and the other half the 5th year to try and control the cost and how it hits our budget. So then we get down to the dollars. As we step through this, new camera purchase in 2016 is $111,000 for the cameras. This year in 2015, we factored in fiber cost. We had asked about Google. The PD was under the assumption that we would get Google Fiber. There was some hiccups there with Google. We were told no. I went out to Price to find out what fiber would cost for us to pay for it, and it's $500,000 to connect all of our substations. We have to have fiber in order to implement a camera project. The reason being is we have to connect fiber to every substation back to police headquarters where all the servers and data would be stored. Right now in our in-car cameras, we're moving little media cards. We take them out of we have a sergeant at the end of the shift, pull the card out, put it in an envelope, drives it to headquarters. The administrative assistant plugs in the computer, downloads the video, erases the video, gives it back to the sergeant in an envelope. He drives back out to the station, and he puts it back in the car. It is completely inefficient. We cannot do that with body cameras, so we need fiber. I've been told that right now it looks like that we will be able to get fiber for somewhere under $100,000 through Google. So that brings the cost down. So you're looking, it's a $400,000 savings, be about $160,000 this year. So the next cost that we didn't have the first time was to this administrative support specialist. Currently, we have an administrative support specialist who manages our 19 in-car cameras. It takes about 50% of her day to do what I just described, download videos onto the server, and then go through and say, okay, here's a work order for a video from a pursuit. I've got to download this. She has to tag it. She's got to put the CD down in the property room. So it takes a lot of work. With 235 cameras, body cameras, there is no way that employee is going to be able to manage all those videos and the in-car camera. We will have to add an employee to our PIN inventory. We're going to have to hire somebody else to help manage that. So we spread the cost out, and I'll go through this real quick. We spread the cost out over 10 years. I kind of progressed it out 10 years so you can get a view of long-term cost. And roughly we're at $3.3 million. Now, let me just say this caveat. That is $3.3 million in today's cost. That's today's cost. That is replacing our storage, I don't know what you call them, storage servers, replacing our storage servers every 5 years. That is where a big portion of this cost comes in, because the servers to store the short and long-term data or files is about $800,000. And we have to replace that every 5 years. We looked at doing cloud storage. Before the issue of body cameras came up, our motorcycle officers requested that the department buy body cameras because they do a lot of car stops and they don't have any way to record them. So we hooked up with a company and we were experimenting with them, and we were using a cloud server. And the initial reports were the cloud server works real well. The company would manage our data, delete our data, purge our data according to what we tell them. It was $25 a month per camera. Problem is, Ferguson happened. When Ferguson happened, the same company notifies us that they're going to $55 a month per camera to store our files on the cloud. When we called to find out why such a drastic jump, they said because cameras are going to be in demand, our servers on the cloud are going to be in demand, so we have to raise the cost. When we looked at this project, we believe that the best way for us to possibly control costs is to have our own servers to store our own videos on. Now, these are all today costs. There's a couple of things that I can't predict for you. This year, the state of Kansas came in and they had a bill proposed by one of the state legislatures to come in and regulate how law enforcement agencies in the state of Kansas use body-worn cameras. They had things like how long files would be stored, what would happen if a complaint or lawsuit was filed against an officer and the officer for some reason did not record that event, that the evidence would, the courts would look at it most favorable to the complainant in those situations because they should have been video. I don't know what the legislature will do, but I can tell you this. If there is legislation introduced that makes us save our files longer, our videos longer, or it says that files will run for a complete 8-hour shift, these costs will go up substantially. So there's some unknowns in there. We did get the federal grant. The federal grant is for about $352,000. And over a 10-year period, that's not much, going to $3.3 million. And that's just believing that the cost will never change over the next 10 years. So if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to try and answer them.
Commissioner Kane.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, the chief comes to our committee the other day, and I thought, boy, this is going to work out pretty good when we first started talking about the body cameras. You know, that'll protect our officers, protect the people that live here. But then, I mean, if we go back to when we were forced to buy radios that were compatible for the metropolitan area at a cost of $2 million, you know, you sit there and you're like, oh, because, as I said the other day, this is the expense that keeps on giving, and the unknowns are more than the knowns. And like right now, the cameras are at a premium because I think only one or two corporations makes them.
I'm not sure how many right now.
There's not very many, and eventually it'll be flooded. Well, there'll be more and they'll be cheaper, obviously. But this is an expense that I don't think this commission can take on as much as I would like to take it on would it be impossible to fund this and still maintain our mill levy where it's at? So I don't know what anybody else thinks, but I'm not ready to purchase something that's this expensive.
Commissioner Bynum.
When you came to the standing committee originally and we talked about applying for the federal grant, and then I think when you came back, we were supportive. There's support for the concept of the body-worn camera. I felt like at the time that we gave approval to apply, we were putting that grant ahead of making the policy. And I still feel that way today. We see that there are expenses associated with it that we had not anticipated. It's a very expensive proposition. There are a lot of unanswered questions. And I think that in general, we have expressed support for the notion, but there's a lot of work to do ahead of implementing a project like this. I think we're going to be asking that we deny the grant. And the last thing I have is a question for you. A year or so ago, we were at a Livable Neighborhoods dinner, and there were officers there from Topeka, and I'm certain they were wearing body-worn cameras. And I'm wondering if we've reached out to our friends in Topeka to talk to them about what policies have they created, how many of their officers are wearing them. Those are our friends over there. Those are our former KCK Police Department folks. I'll bet they'd tell us what they're doing. So if we haven't, we should ask them. But I think we're going to be, is it a motion?
You're welcome to make a motion.
Should make a motion to deny acceptance of the grant.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Commissioner McKiernan.
Thank you. Chief, I'm not going to say that I don't have a life, but I actually watched your presentation on television Monday night.
You don't have a life. I'll say it for you.
Okay, fair enough. And I will say, I was stunned when you put the yellow letters down at the bottom of this slide and estimated out the total cost or the cost of ongoing operation. It was much, much higher than I had anticipated, but I think you've done a nice job of outlining where those costs come from, and if anything, my thought was you've probably estimated conservatively on this, and the actual costs of operation would probably be higher than that. And so this comes with capital costs and personnel costs that I didn't really think about the first time around. And I'd be, not that I'm asking you to do it, but I'd just be curious to know, you know, every year when we go through CMIP, for example, we ask you to prioritize out of all the possible things that you really should purchase or lease or replace for the standard operation of your police department, where these would fall in and I know that it's hard to estimate that because these have proven to be or could potentially be an extraordinarily valuable piece of equipment for the protection of both our citizens and our officers. But I would just, back to what Commissioner Kane had said here, there are so many other things that your police department requires because we've put off these purchases for so long that I'm struggling with where this fits in the priority matrix.
Well, if I could comment on priorities, you know, looking at this project, it would be nice to have. There are some things that we could do in advance. I think probably one of the biggest things that this has brought out is that we got to get fiber. Fiber will improve the efficiency in the way we handle our in-car cameras. That is huge for us. Once that piece is in place, then we can look at what would it take to build this project out over years. Instead of doing it now and jumping into the money and really obligating ourselves to some unknown costs. The fiber is huge. That will be one of the top priorities for next year for us, is getting the money to be able to secure fiber to all of our substations back to headquarters.
Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief. I just want to reiterate the point brought up by Commissioner Kane, and I agreed Monday. I sat in on that committee meeting, And it put in perspective these numbers for me that the grant we're getting would be the rough equivalent of just 1 year, and then that's it. So I agree with this would be great to have, but something else you said Monday night that stuck with me as well was the status of our in-car cameras. Are they okay? Where are we with that? And the expectation that you mentioned Monday night, if people see these, they should be functional, and the equipment that we have should be usable. So it would be great to put the emphasis on that, to keep what we have going, and look to this in the future with some more money and some more time. This would be great to have, but I just think right now on the numbers, we can't do it.
The question about the in-car cameras, I think there's about $700,000 budgeted toward this if we would have got the grant. That would be great money to get our in-car camera system where it needs to be, paying for the fiber, making sure that they're on good repair, and add them to some of the patrol cars that don't currently have them. So there's money, I think, budgeted for next year that was budgeted for this that could go to make that project or that program very solid.
Commissioner Johnson.
Chief, I just want to commend you for the work that you put into this and just all what the work that the officers are doing that are part of the force. I had some opportunity to just observe them in recent days, and I was very impressed with them. So congratulations on that. I would say, while I agree that the numbers don't really, they don't add up, so to speak, I would encourage you to look for opportunities as we go along. God forbid one situation occurs and maybe our perspective changes. I hope and pray. I genuinely hope and pray that never happens in our community. But I would say that you would put this, don't let this die. Don't let this issue die. We know that it doesn't make sense in terms of dollars and cents, but it could happen. Something could happen, and we're seeing it every day. Something happening all the time, and so I would make sure that I would just ask that you would keep this as something that we're continuing to look into for opportunities where that cost may go down, creative ideas that may, allow us to offer some type of alternative solution. I would just ask of that from you. Thank you.
We will. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Murguia.
Thank you, Chief, for your presentation. It was very well done and packed full of facts, which I always appreciate. I will just tell the commission that when this topic first came up in front of the commission, since I'm not a police officer and I don't know about security, I didn't really know what to think. So I've made it a practice now of reaching out to some researchers over at the University of Kansas to ask them what the latest data says on body-worn cameras for police officers. And at that time, this was after the vote by the time they got back to me, they had said that there were definitely downsides, especially in terms of the cost trade-off and data storage issue, which just is emphasizing what you're already saying. Balance of cost to value was a big piece of that. And also that the view is only where officer's chest body is orientated and can't take in the periphery, so can't equal the view of the officer. Now, I wish I sounded that smart, but that's right from the doctor that researched the data for me. So it wasn't just a cost issue, but I would add that at the time that she collected this data for me, it was not in favor of officers wearing body cameras. But she does admit in her recent, because I knew this was coming on the agenda, she does admit that because so many more cities are implementing the use of body cameras, that the research and the data may have changed. So I would just suggest that beyond the cost, that we take a look at the latest data when you come back in front of us.
We will.
Commissioner McKiernan.
Thank you. One last thing. I just wanted to say that I'm surprised. We've had a high-speed fiber partner here in Kansas City for a couple of years, and I'm surprised and a little disappointed to understand that basically you can't get there from here, is what I'm hearing you saying. So I would like to follow up with you and find out what barriers there have been to getting high-speed connections from your substations back to headquarters so that we can look at innovative ways to overcome those barriers, because it would seem to me that anything we could do that would help the police department would similarly help other public safety as well as other governmental operations. So I'll follow up with you afterwards. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
I do want to say, and I appreciate the Chief's presentation, and I agree with the Commission that now is not the right time to accept this grant. I hate applying for a grant and turning it down, because I think as a rule, that's bad policy, and I think as a rule it's looked down upon when we apply in the future to turn down a grant. The concerns I have, obviously the costs are one, though I would say $330,000 through the course in a budget as large as our police department, how much money we spend on police, I think is not an unreasonable amount of money to think about for a program if it's the right program. And I think that's the key. And I think we do need some time to think about it. My experience is everything we want to do costs more than we wish it did. So I think the concerns too that I do want to echo what Commissioner Johnson said. I don't want to just say, no, we've decided tonight we're not doing body cameras. I think what we're deciding tonight is that we're not prepared to take this grant because we're not ready to move forward on the cameras under this format. Now, if they'd give us a 2-year, an 18 or 24 month push to say, would you give us 24 months to decide, and we could look into it more, that might be worthwhile. If they wouldn't do that, because there might be other departments that are further along and ready to go than we are, they might want to reallocate it. But I obviously I hate turning down money. But I also agree that it is only the cost of the initial camera purchase, and it doesn't even cover the cost of the storage purchase. So as much money as it is, it's only as someone pointed out, it's only a 10%. And I like grants that are 50% and 80%. Those might not be out there. Also, while you're continuing to look into this, I really want to look at best practices for privacy issues. I'm very concerned about police officers walking into someone's home who have had a call for help, and maybe it's a CIT call, maybe it's a member of their family who's having a mental health or behavioral health crisis. I want to make sure that that video protects the confidentiality of our residents and isn't simply available for a public information request, because that kind of video would compromise really the privacy of someone's home. Police find people sometimes in their worst moments of their lives, and I would want to make sure that if it's not the commission of a crime, that video is able to be protected, so we protect those privacy concerns of our citizens. And I know cities are wrestling with those, because that's one of the hot topics I hear about when I hear about that, and I'd want to make sure we had a clear policy for what videos are even releasable and why, maybe we don't store them, maybe we have to store them for 120 days just for any reason, but I just want to make sure there's a clear protection of people's privacy. So I don't know if you've already have a policy that you're working on in that regard.
We do. Because the grant was going to give us 6 months to come up with a policy, and we've got a rough draft of a policy. But here's what has to happen: is we were going to go to livable neighborhoods, the Fraternal Order of Police, the Law Enforcement Advisory Board, the DA's office, City Prosecutor's office, and let them review the policy and then meet with them to see if they had any suggestions. We have looked at the privacy issue. As good as our policy may be or become, the issue is whether or not the state will come in and legislate that these videos have to be open record, that a third party can get access to the videos. Those are the unknowns that we don't know. Jenny Myers has been involved in this with us from the beginning, from legal. She has done a whole lot of research. She sits on our policy review committee, and we felt like we were in a position to probably start moving forward with the policy if the grant was accepted. But the unknown would just be, what's the state going to do?
That's an unknown in a lot of areas of our life up here on this commission. The other issue is I do like the idea of the money that you have allocated to match this grant going towards the car cameras and the infrastructure to get this set up. Perhaps some of the infrastructure purchased for the car cameras could be purchased that could begin to prepare the way for the eventual movement to the body cameras. I just want to say I feel strongly that body-worn cameras are probably the wave of the future. I do think it's worth being, because of the cost, it's worth being cautious and seeing how it's developing in other cities. Because I do think, I mean, the statistics do show that it reduces complaints against police by some 80%. It also reduces incidents of potential violence for citizens. So I think it's a benefit to both our officers and our citizens to have these long-term. Most of us up here have sat in executive session when we've had legal action against the city, and we've had to make payouts to claimants because of behavior that wasn't conducive with our values and expectations and didn't go with the law. And so we've had to make those kind of payments. I think from a fiscal responsibility perspective, those payments tend to range in the $250,000 to $500,000 range, and it doesn't take very many of those for this to seem like a bargain, what you're offering up here, if we can prevent those. I do know of one specific case. Right after Ferguson, there was an arrest made, and there were allegations made of abuse and racial abuse. That dash camera was working. It was on the site. Media came over and viewed that and walked away and said it was nothing because the officer had acted absolutely in the right manner, and everything checked out on the video. So there is great value to our community and to our officers and to our citizens. So I want us to continue to push this out. And again, just to monitor other cities. These best practices are moving fast. And really, we just have current practices, maybe not even best practices yet. So I would say I'm comfortable turning down the grant today. We have a motion and a second, but I hope that we can, I do have a question. Chief, do you think there's any value in asking for a 24-month extension?
I mean, if you ask for a 24-month extension, I mean, it won't change the cost here.
No, that's
Still,
right.
the unknown is the state. The Police Executive Research Forum, PERF, the executive director of that, Chuck Wexler, has stated that law enforcement agencies should move very cautiously toward a body-worn camera program because of the issues of privacy, because of the issues of cost, because, you know, the camera, like Commissioner Murguia said, it doesn't capture everything. Once we put a camera on an officer, there will be an expectation in district court and municipal court that there will be video of the incident. And I think what happens is if there's no video, you will find that conviction rates will go down because the courts and the public will become dependent upon that evidence. And those are some of the things that the current, you know, people who are looking at what's going on in law enforcement, that's some of their thoughts. So 24 months, you know, I do like the idea of strengthening our in-car camera. Our in-car cameras have been invaluable. Accidents do happen when we're in pursuits. We've gotten good videos from that have helped our position. That program has not been as strong as it could be. By getting the fiber in, I will improve the efficiency in which we move the data from the car to headquarters, which is a big plus. It will save huge man hours. And then also putting more cameras out there. I really like that idea and kind of build the infrastructure for the body-worn cameras, and then let's see what happens with the legislature.
I'll accept that as a no, it's not worth pushing it for 2 years.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Very good.
Roll call.
Roll call, McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
The vote is 10-0. That motion carried.
All right, thank you. Mr. Bach has a comment.
I just want to clarify, and I believe this is the clear direction since we authorized $500,000 to go toward this grant, that this governing body is giving me authority to work with the chief as we go through and identify other expenditures we'd have in relation to the fiber or the car cameras, that we can direct money for that in the coming year.
Do you need a motion, Mr. Bach, to that effect?
That would be.
It is $500,000.
The budget revision I would have to move through, but that, I mean, we can go through and submit as we come along, but we can start down that direction, and then I can submit budget revisions to the standing committee as we go along.
I'd
Then we
make
can
that
show you where
motion.
the money is.
Make,
That motion.
Second.
okay, it's been moved and seconded for the administrator and the chief to work together to reallocate the current allocation as we've stated today. And of course, we will see those budget allocations as they come forward, as we always do. Roll call.
Roll call, McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
The vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
Go Royals.
Thank you.